scale of the destruction in Gaza's southern city of Khan Yunis is becoming clearer. This is the Al Amal hospital. As you can see, it's been left in ruins after Israeli troops withdrew from the area. The Palestine Red Crescent described it as a deliberate destruction which had left the facility incapable of helping patients. In March, Israeli forces besieged Al Amal and nearby Nasser hospitals, pinning down medical teams under heavy fire. Medical staff and patients were killed. Israel claims the hospitals are used as Hamas bases, something the group denies. France has dropped 7 tons of aid into northern Gaza, mostly food and basic necessities. French President Emmanuel Macron has again called for an immediate ceasefire to limit civilian casualties in Gaza and for the release of all captives. Meanwhile, the European Union Foreign Policy Chief Josep Borrell has accused Israel of using starvation as a weapon of war. In Egypt, Muslims gathered for Eid al-Fitr morning prayers, taking time to wish Palestinians peace. In Giza, people put up balloons in the colours of the Palestinian flag. Egypt has been heavily involved in trying to bring an end to the war, hosting peace talks and opening its border to allow aid and diplomatic access to Gaza.
Happy Eid. I hope that the coming days are pleasant. May God support our brothers in Palestine and protect them. And, God willing, grant them Eid holiday that will bring them joy, peace and blessings.
Let's bring in Arise correspondent Lapi Olarinoye, who's in London for us. Lapi, I want to start with the Israeli strike on Ismail Haniyeh's family. What justification have Israel given for targeting his sons and grandchildren?
Well, so far, there hasn't been any word from Israel just yet. Of course, the news has just broke in the last couple of minutes, if not an hour or so. But as you saw there in your intro, there was the visible reaction from the Hamas leader. In the words that I read earlier, was describing it as martyrdom. Of course, this could be a delayed reaction because he's not only lost his children, but also his grandchildren as well. Israel has been trying to penetrate the tunnels that the Hamas leadership and Hamas soldiers are said to be hiding in. That is also a place that is said to have been covered with hostages as well as other types of security. But these tunnels are underground tunnels, and it's a justification from Israel as to why they have doubled down on the airstrikes and intensified the amount of strikes that have been taking place across Gaza, because this is basically the man that they're trying to get, as well as all those hostages. I believe there's still about 200 hostages left for Israel to capture back to Israel. And so for that reason, just in answer to your question, just now, there hasn't been an immediate reaction. But what we do know from the building news is that the targets have been the Hamas leadership.
I mean, we know that Ismail Haniyeh is actually in Doha. The Hamas leadership is variously spread throughout the Middle East, mostly Beirut, Qatar, not actually so many of them in Gaza itself, although there are certainly some top commanders there. But we are seeing civilians paying the biggest price in this war. You know, they are marking Eid in Gaza, normally a happy event, a day of celebration, but this year is very different. Just bring viewers up to speed, if you will, about the conditions most of Gaza's population is living in right now.
Well, in terms of the numbers, Faith, they're said to have been about up from 30,000 people who lost their lives. This war broke out back in October. There's up from 70,000 people who still remain injured. But actually, some of the lasting impacts of this is, of course, torn families, incomplete families, as well as now an impending famine, a struggle for aid, basic amenities like water, food and shelter. There are thousands of Gazans and the likes who have become displaced. And as the war intensifies, now that spreads to even more humanitarian staff that are also being affected by this war. Now, in a month like Ramadan, where it's about kind of denying yourself of food and being more reflective, this is a tough time for people living in this part of the world, particularly on a day like Eid, where it's about kind of sharing food, spending time with loved ones. For many people who are in Gaza that have lost family members, lost friends, extended family, and so on, this is more about reflecting on the tough time that they've had, and that's ongoing as well. In fact, I saw really moving pictures of people who were taking the morning Eid prayers, but surrounded by destruction of one of the prominent mosques. Now, that just goes to show that although there is so much heartbreak and sorrow around them, the people of that place in Gaza remain very resilient, but also very reflective. Other people have gone to visit graves of loved ones. Others have tried to make the best of a bad situation. I've seen pictures coming out from news agencies of displaced people's centres trying to make the best food that they can for young children who are, of course, very traumatized as to what they have seen over the last months. But it's not necessarily a celebration. In fact, this is opening some of the wounds that are yet healed for many families across the region.
And I mean, amid all of this, Slappy, the threat of a Rafah ground invasion very much playing on the minds of people in Gaza. Netanyahu says a date has been set, but he hasn't said when. It could be the 30th of April, it could be the 30th of December. Just how calculated do you think he's being here, given the potential scale of civilian casualties?
Well, I think for the first time, Israel has shown some sort of restraint every single time that the airstrikes have been announced or have been impending. It has gone ahead with mass destruction to follow. This time around, with mounting pressures from allies, from people like Biden, who have just said that Israel aren't taking the best routes on this war, as well as countries like Spain now offering solidarity to Palestinians. It is a time for Israel to kind of take a step back and recalculate. This, of course, does not stop the strikes from happening. Like you said, we don't know when it could happen, but in other parts of the region, we've seen the IDF withdraw from southern parts of Gaza, like you mentioned there, in Khan Yunis, where we saw that people have gone back to their homes, which is basically rubble now. A lot of destruction, a lot of places where people are no longer able to recognize. So there is a bit of confusion in the air as to what steps Israel would take next, but there is mounting pressure for them to cease fire. For how long, is still unknown. And what steps that they will take next is still unknown. But there's a lot of mounting pressure within Israel's party system to continue the war, to continue the destruction until all Israeli hostages are brought back. What direction Netanyahu will take is still very much up in the air.
Lape, thank you very much for that analysis. Lape Olorunoye from London, Arise correspondent there.